That O200, that Continental O200 noise.
I do like that O200, or that Continental, everybody.
Is that one of your faves?
I like the O200.
What was on the 206s?
054, IO520.
And those you did not have good luck with.
I never had problems with them. In the Cessna 206 on amphibs that I flew, no problem. Now, I also treated it very gently, but it was also low time anyway. So,
okay,
if there were any ramifications of if I misused it, I wouldn't have seen them.
Talking more the twin set run Lake Erie Islands flights for years.
Hot, cold, nonstop all day long, 20 to 30 cycles every single day.
Did not like that.
No, for 900 hours. They basically adopted the policy of topping them all new cylinder, meaning topping means all new cylinders at either 700 or 900 hours. I can't remember the TBO off the top of my head. I want to say it's an 1800 hour TBO on the IO 520. So they topped them at half life just to maintain compression through the typical TBO was the bottom line.
What was the year of 206s you guys had?
They were late 70s.
Okay.
And I don't remember the ages. Late 70s, early 80s.
But when were you guys running the piss out of them?
In the early 90s through mid 90s.
Okay.
So when I brought up Mike Bush earlier, that's kind of what I was referring to. It was like the compressions on cylinders, right? And there's some idea now that compressions on cylinders really don't mean much.
I've always agreed with that. That's understanding basic mechanics. But yeah,
right? Yeah, I mean, it could be it could just be one of like a tappet on the top that's loose or something like that needs to be replaced, not the pressure in the cylinder.
Yeah, well, the mechanics we had at the time, I would love to see somebody go tell them something different. But
they were very, very passionate.
Right. Well,
mechanics.
So the 60 whatever PSI on a cylinder doesn't. I mean, what does it really tell you?
It's an arbitrary number because that has no representation of the operating pressures exhibited in that combustion chamber when it's running.
Exactly.
We get all that. I've had all these conversations. I would dare you to tell our director of maintenance
it is
different. It's just one of those things.
It is one of my dream episodes to get both of these mechanics on for a one show here in person. Would that not be a glorious disaster?
It would be a glorious disaster.
You might have to
and they're both very knowledgeable.
Incredibly well. That's the thing. Very passionate, very knowledgeable, and it's just
not afraid to curse.
Definitely not afraid. Definitely not afraid of that. Well, yeah. Aviation Mike, 100%, and that is one thing. Their defense at all. Well, I don't have to warm up a Lycoming, and it tests fine. So that was always part of their ammunition. I'm sure they had a lot of other facets in their decision-making process. The one dude had a vendetta against Continentals, which is partly where I got mine, which I will never overcome. I need a lot of therapy. But Lycomings are just bulletproof, and we can run them under the same conditions to TBO and beyond. We got the exemption from the FAA for the extra 200 hours. No problem. I beat the shit out of them myself, and they all still, compressions are great. I understand compressions are not the whole thing. I understand that there are, all the other factors. That's not what it operates under during normal operation, when it's warmed up, this, that, the other thing. Well, yeah, you can hear shit coming, or the sound coming out of the exhaust valve, intake valve. I get all that. Pound on it with a rubber mallet. I get all that.
I think another interesting point, too, is that compressions can get better over time, right? I mean, if you have an aircraft engine that sits for 6-7 months, it might test low, but then you run it for 3 weeks every day. The compressions all of a sudden, they go from 60 to 72, right? Wild. Oh, I think I lost you guys.
That type of analysis. I know your train of thought. I'm just totally ignorant to that. Like having a take on it.
I don't necessarily follow your initial statement. I agreed with, but then your scenario you painted, I don't follow.
Just that, you know, you can let an engine sit over time and the compressions will steadily degrade, right? Based on a lot of... Yeah, well, I mean, for you say you have an aircraft and you let it sit for 6 months by itself, never run it. You test it immediately before you let it sit. You test it immediately like after 6 months of not running.
Yep.
And compressions can degrade naturally.
Yep.
Right? And then all of a sudden you start using that aircraft again. You run it for 6-7 weeks. Now the compressions start to come back up.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That was my whole point. Is that's, I mean, it's such an odd standard of measurement because there's so many ways to, I mean, it's not an exact science, right?
No, which is why I don't think it should be handled as such.
Right, rust in the cylinder. Anything else?
They basically put a death sentence on cold, low compression just because the majority of this individual's experience, as I understand it, was in marine engines, and then the majority, I mean, that was his early experience in motors. Than his later experience. You know, he's an IA and an A&P, all that good stuff. Very good school that he went to and everything. I mean, I definitely trust him, but I think he's holding on to some of the old wives' tales, old school thought processes, and in his exposure to a lot of Lycomings led him down, and he would apply that the same to Continentals, which they need to be warm. They need to be at operating temp. Who gives a shit what it is when it's cold? I want to know what it produces when it's warm. Like, that's just, like, to me, mechanics 101. Like, you don't do a dragster down the drag strip, a cold engine. It's warmed up. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever. And we learned a lot from all of these experiences, and I think that company is still learning. But at the time, this was kind of their first exposure with big bore Continentals. And I think there's a very steep learning curve. I think they ultimately cut the experiment off short because they were not testing the same as all the Lycomings. You know, they had Britten-Norman Islanders, 2 IO540s apiece. They had 3 Navajos, 2 IO540s apiece. 2 Cherokee 6s, a Saratoga, all IO540s. So they just had all Archers, every single member of the Piper Cherokee family they had exposure to, obviously all Lycomings. So they had all this background information and exposure to the Lycomings, basically bulletproof, which obviously is a benefit. If you have to treat something a little bit different, I mean, how can you not treat it as a little bit inferior? That's my opinion. But I think you just need to know, you just need to have experience with that airplane and that power plant to really know heads from tails. And they had all this background information and years, 20, 30 years of exposure in the same circumstances, severe circumstances with Lycomings that could just weather the storm a lot better, in their opinion. They didn't know how to handle it, so they had no other way, no other lens to look at it through other than it's an inferior product,
right?
Which I, unfortunately, have not been able to shake. Even though I've had my own independent exposure to the same power plant, the IO520, in the same airframe, a Cessna 206. I just still haven't really been able to.
How did they handle, like, that? Those were all in, like, aircraft you guys had.
Mm-hmm.
That was like their babies. But they did other, like, people would bring their airplanes in from the shop, the general flying population.
Yeah.
There was people, I'm sure, who had Continentals. How did they handle those?
They never liked them. They were always had this negative aura, around them. Like, it's an 0470. Even though we all know an 0470 in the backcountry, the Cessna 180s, one of the most prolific backcountry airplanes there is. That's huge. Most Cessna 182s, probably 80% of them are 0470s. And then the Cessna 180, all 0470s. Cessna 185.
Talk about the 0300s, right? Phenomenal engine.
That's a great engine.
172s. Yeah.
It's a great engine. Smooth as a sewing machine smooth. 047 A65s in a Piper Cub. C85, C90s, all those in J3 Cubs. The original Super Cub had a C90 in it. Those are great power plants. 0300 I don't know what all models they put, but they had those in the Cessna 170s, Cessna 172s.
Early 172s, yeah.
Yeah, they're all great. I mean, you had low displacement, a lot of cylinders. That's a recipe for a really smooth running engine. And I don't think they had it. I think those are basically a C90 with 2 more cylinders, from my understanding.
Or 200 with an extra cylinder, extra 2.
Or that.
Yeah.
Or that. Yeah, basically same difference. But when you start talking fuel injection, big bore, and a totally different cylinder design, I don't want to discount that. I don't want to say that the IO 520 doesn't have maybe its deficits, but like an IO 550, like on a Cirrus, Columbia or Cessna, TTX, Corvallis, whatever it was in the year that you bought it, phenomenal engine. That's in a Baron. That's in a Bonanza, Cirrus. All the different engines or all the different airframes that engine is in, phenomenal engine.
Right. Did you follow that? Was it Cirrus just recently grounded most of their fleet from 2020 on? Because
I'm not an aviation nerd.
Oh, I haven't heard this either.
You seem to follow like aviation.
I try to be an aviator.
I don't want to. I don't want to follow. Like I don't want more aviation in my life.
Anyway,
That's
what happened was,
Lee-
there was a service bulletin issued by Continental. I think I can't remember what the specific was. I was just curious if you knew anything about it. But
well, tell me about it.
I don't know. That's all I know about it. There's a service bulletin issued on that engine. They grounded them for a while, and Continental came up with a correction. Should be fine.
That could be something super simple. That could be something as simple as the fly or the in the accessory housing when gear is made out of the wrong material.
Right. It was not an AD. It was an SB for sure. So.
Yeah. Okay. So the difference between a service bulletin and an AD is service bulletin is manufacturer, AD is FAA driven.
Yes, and subject to notice and comment.
That's good for the audience to know. If they don't know.
Lee does not want to be an aviation nerd and is. I want to be an aviation nerd and I'm not. So that's the summary here.
Product of my environment.
Yes. All right. That last part was plenty for like an in-between episode thing. I'm getting sleepy unless you guys have any more poignant
Ian?
things to drive home here.
I don't know, man. No, I think I'm good. I talked about all my legal stuff, and
all right
for now.
I'm sure there's plenty more legal stuff.
Oh god!
I mean,
we literally covered one regulation.
Yeah,
and barely.
There's a whole book here.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks again, Ian, for coming on.
Thank you so much. 2 weeks in a row. What a guy.
No,
I've been here for weeks, man. Thank you. We appreciate it.
It was tough, but worth it.
Thanks for everybody hanging out in the live chat. We're going to cut it off here. 3, 2, 1. Later.